going forward. We have a plan going forward to change how we deliver the courses, and recording it is one of the key elements for that for you. Okay, so put your name in the chat, please. Also put your name on your Zoom image. That's really helpful for us. And if you don't know how to do that, it's just a right click and it should allow you to rename. We've got 2.5 slots. Please put in the chat, as many of you have already done, which is great, who you are and where you're based. And we do love hearing about what ticks your boxes, what you particularly like as well. Even if it's nothing marine related, you know, we're still interested. And then you can put questions and comments in the chat. We'll see how it goes for how long we've got for questions. We do like to leave enough time for questions, but that relies on us as speakers keeping to time. Get my timer out now while I'm thinking about it. And live questions to presenters at the end, assuming we've got time. And any outstanding questions, you can just email in. You know what the email is. You've been emailing Zoe so far. So tonight we're going to cover an overview to start with, which is what I'm delivering. Cetaceans with Dan Jarvis. We've got some topical issues to discuss. I'll be doing seabirds. Claire will be doing shoreline, and then we've got some topical issues. And then on Wednesday, it's seals, more topical issues, other species, blue health, discussion a bit about your patch and what happens on your patch and what it's like, plus, minus, and interesting, and then topical issues. So that's how it's going to run. Let me introduce you to Zoe, who you have been engaging with because you've been getting emails from her. She's super talented in all sorts of respects, and we're very lucky to have her for sure. Graphic design and digital marketing. She's a coastal surveyor for us at the Seal Research Trust, and does all sorts of interesting things, very interested in all species. National Trust Wildlife Engagement volunteer locally. She's also got her own storybooks that she illustrates with her husband, who writes them. She's previously a trained day skipper and previously a trustee of the Cornish Maritime Trust, so she understands about being at sea, a recreational kayaker, and completely and utterly passionate wildlife watcher, which is wonderful. Dan Jarvis is with us as well. He's got his marine biology degree from Plymouth University, PG Cert from Nova Southeastern Uni. I'm assuming, Dan, is that Canada or is that the USA? Sorry to ask. I should have asked you before. Can't say again?
USA.
USA. Okay, that's cool. And he is the director of British Divers Marine Life Rescue, and his responsibility is welfare and conservation. He's also a trustee of the Seal Research Trust, lead surveyor for Cetacea, organisation Cetacea, and strandings volunteer for Cornwall Wildlife Trust Marine Strandings Network and the Cornwall Marine Pathology team, who do post-mortems on dead stranded animals. So this is me. I'm the founder and director of the Seal Research Trust. I've done a lot of things in my time. The first thing I ever did was went out on that top. I'm not going to be judgmental about it, but I went out with a Maranatha. It was the first thing I ever did, which is a bottom trawling fishing vessel. I have quite different views about that. I was 17 at the time. So things have changed a lot along the way, because you can tell I'm quite a lot older than 17 now. I chair the Seal Alliance, which is a national organisation of seal-related conservation groups, science advisor for British Divers Marine Life Rescue, and currently chair the Mammal Society Seal Research Working Group and on their Scientific Advisory Committee. Just get wet a lot. I like being around the coast and I love getting wet, which is the main thing, really. And then Claire, who is super, super talented and highly scientific. We always learn a lot from Claire. Co-steering she's done. She's worked with outdoor providers for sea kayaking, canoeing, supping, and is a marine biology academic at the University of Exeter. Lots of experience from Cornwall to Chile. That's quite wide-ranging. Sea kayak leader, surf kayak leader, co-steering instructor. So all of those really exciting adventure things around the coast. Commercial and scientific diver. Actually, Claire, I should have talked to you about the dive surveys that we're doing. You might like to get involved with those. I don't know if you still dive. Creator of marine biology and industry interface courses and conferences. She's actually the chair of the Cornwall Marine and Coastal Partnership, a university lecturer, all sorts of places, and obviously been training with WiSe for a long time. So that's the team who you've got tonight. You'll be WiSe certified practitioners, but part of that requires you to commit to abiding by the national and local laws, as well as the supplied WiSe codes of conduct, which are consistent with the general best practice for each of the nations. We'd like you to think education rather than sensation. That's like a general rule of thumb that's quite helpful. To think about your online content as well as your actions and guiding messages, to manage expectations through marketing and briefing. So this is all about consistent best practice messaging throughout the organisation, and to share WiSe principles with guests and followers, because that way the best practice reach gets far and wide and the marine life wins. We do have in return mystery shoppers that we put out with organisations. We monitor ad hoc, admittedly, but members of the public seem to do this an awful lot, monitoring websites and website content and social media. So yeah, having said that, you're required to follow the codes of conduct, which I mentioned, but if we get a concern from somebody, particularly a member of the public, but anyone, about practice for a WiSe certified practitioner, then evidence is required, obviously, and it's high quality evidence, the kind of evidence that an enforcement agency would require to support the concern. Depending on the outcome of the investigation, someone might be suspended from the WiSe website for at least 12 months. You don't get taken off, you just get a suspension notice, and you'll be required to retrain before the suspension is removed. This is all about us trying to address a gap that was identified by existing WiSe operators who were upset when there were other WiSe operators not following best practice. So what you'll get at the end of the course is a declaration to sign, which is essential for you to go on the WiSe website, access to the codes of conduct and legislation, there's shed loads of those, name certificate and logos to use online, 2 stickers, access to a bank of online resources which are constantly being updated, 3-year certification, and a listing on the WiSe website for you personally and the organisation that you work for. But we can't do that until we get your operator declaration. So we do have this graphic, and actually one of the things that we're starting to think about is providing this and signs for wherever you are, whether it's a kiosk or a vessel, wherever it's most helpful for you. It's a very nice graphic, and it demonstrates that everywhere we have to stay 100 metres from wildlife wherever it is possible, and follow the best practice generally. So it's a lovely graphic, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to provide more of those. So wildlife tourism is huge. Absolutely massive and worth a fortune, as you can see. In Great Britain, 17.1 billion, with over almost 300,000 jobs, 27 million overnight visitors and 217 million day visitors. It's absolutely huge. Visit Britain did a survey and found that 71% of people listed wildlife watching as either their sole or a really important reason for their coastal trip, and that experiences with wildlife, particularly seeing marine mammals, evokes deep emotions, intense pleasure, and even awe at the splendour of diversity in our natural world. That's what we want to do, is release those endorphins in people because they're really happy about seeing wildlife at its best in its natural habitat without being affected by us. So these are the Scottish, English, Welsh, Northern Irish and Jersey Marine Code of Conduct. There is also a Guernsey one, which I thought I had put on and I haven't, so I smacked myself for that. But WiSe is compatible with all the national codes, and it's supported by all the national statutory agencies. Wildlife and Countryside Link, who are a combination of 96 wildlife organisations, produce a wildlife crime report every year. So the next one is coming out shortly. But one thing that shocked me with their 2025 report was that marine mammal crime was second only to fisheries. I was quite surprised about that in a way, because that's 2 marine things, but that marine mammal crime was actually greater than badgers, bats and birds of prey put together. So that was really very shocking. 2 words that will come up repeatedly are deliberate and reckless. I'm sure you're familiar with them already, but deliberate disturbance is when a person knows that what they're doing will likely lead to an offence against that species, whereas reckless is that you're aware that whatever you're doing there would be disturbance as a result of your actions, but you go and do it anyway. And that something that any reasonable person could have expected to have foreseen that disturbance would result from whatever they are doing. Interestingly, the Habitats Directive was being looked at by the European Court of Justice, and this is the definition that they've come up with. So if you wish to record disturbance, then it would be great if you did. As the Seal Research Trust, we record disturbance routinely. These are the kinds of information that are vital: date and time, location, videos and photographs, zoomed out so you can see the action and the reaction of the wildlife. And when that's all over and done with, followed by a zoom in, because then people can be identified, whoever's driving the vessel or whoever's involved on the paddle or whatever. And then, if possible, identifiable features, because then it's more follow-upable. Descriptions of the people, and then contacting 999 or 101 as soon as possible, asking for a wildlife crime officer. Having said that, in Cornwall, for example, there's a report a wildlife crime webpage, which is much easier to use. That's the website for the National Wildlife Crime Unit, and there are some wildlife crime links. Just to tell you about MMO sites, now this probably doesn't apply in Scotland, but MMO is setting up a national recording database for seal and other marine mammal disturbance, not just seals, seabirds as well. So all marine creature disturbance, they're setting up a standardised national database, which should happen this year, but that's for partners like us to trial for at least a year. So it might be a few years before it happens. And I hope you've heard of Operation Seabird, which is a partnership between the police, the MMO, and Natural England, and NGOs, environmental non-government organisations, where we all club together to share best practice and try and raise awareness with the public. There are 5 key factors that are going to be consistent throughout these 2 nights of courses, and they are safety. Clearly, your safety, people's safety, and marine wildlife safety is a top priority. To remember that group size of the number of people and the number of animals will make a difference to the likelihood of impacts on natural behaviour. So you need to think about, are there more people? Are there more animals? If so, there is a greater risk of disturbance. Distance and aspect, so the angle of approach are really key as well. That the speed that you use and the time that you spend there are vital, and obviously seasonality and location can make a difference. More of that in the course, to be fair. So that's it. That's what we're up to, and I can finish there, and I can hand over to Zoe. Who's next? I did have it on my screen and I've closed it, which is not very intelligent.
Dan is next.
Over to you, Dan Jarvis, Director of Welfare and Conservation at British Divers Marine Life Rescue. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That would be a good move. There you go.
Thanks, Sue. I'll just start sharing my screen. Can you tell me if this is coming up, please?
It looks like it's going to. Yep. Yeah, we can see that. And that's perfect, Dan. Well done. Excellent.
Okay. Oh, how do we get rid of the thing up top? Does it disappear for a minute? Not sure. Anyway, sorry. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the WiSe course and to our first full presentation. I'll be covering cetaceans in this section. And we are going to look at some species ID of some of the more frequently observed species around the UK. We'll touch on a couple more that maybe aren't so much. But just appreciating that we all come from different backgrounds and different knowledge levels as well. So if this is all stuff that you know, brilliant. But also for those of you who do already know a lot of this, just appreciate that there might be some that are taking part in the course who don't know much of this, or cetaceans aren't their specialist subject, for example. So we'll try and cover all the bases as best as we can. So cetaceans, to start off with, they are mammals. They breathe air. They are warm-blooded. They suckle their young, just like we do. So we're all the same. There are 94 species currently recognised. That was the most recent update last year. The number does fluctuate. As some of you might know, there are new species that are still being discovered occasionally. There was a new one last year. And there are also species that do occasionally go extinct. So the last one was the Yangtze River dolphin several years ago. There may sadly be another one quite soon, which is the Vicky's porpoise on the west coast of Mexico. So that number does still change. Here in the UK, we've had 32 species. 31 species. I'm pretty sure that's still correct at the moment, recorded. Obviously, a lot of them might be very infrequently seen, or they might actually be only known from a single sighting or stranding record, while a number of them are more regularly seen species. Generally speaking, they are split into 2 broad groups. One is the mysticetes, or the baleen whales. Mysticetes is mustached whales. And then there's the odontocetes, which are the toothed whales. So basically, if it's got teeth, it'll be in the latter group. If it's not, it'll be a baleen whale, and it'll be in the former group. Their general anatomy you can see hopefully from the diagram here. So starting at the back, we've got the tail, which the fins are called flukes there. There's the left fluke and the right fluke. They're attached to the tail stock, which is the engine room. It's very muscular, and that's where they get all their swimming action and locomotion from. The genital slit will be underneath there. Sorry, that arrow's in slightly the wrong place there. It should be on the underside, and you can tell whether it's a male or a female if you ever get a good enough look, but in the field it's really, really difficult. There's the dorsal fin up at the top there, which is to assist with stability when they're swimming, as are the pectoral fins, which can also move a little bit, and they can assist with directional changes too. And then up around the head, we've got the blowhole, which of course is their nostril that they breathe through. Interesting fact at this point, all of the odontocetes have a single blowhole. All of the mystocetes have a double blowhole, a bit like our nostrils that are divided into two sections. They've got an ear. It's really, really hard to see. It is pretty much a little dot, so you almost can never see it unless you're up extremely close. And I'm talking really about at strandings, i.e. when we're dealing with them at live strandings, for instance. Many species have a melon, or certainly the odontocetes do. They have a melon. We'll talk a little bit more about what that does shortly. And then again, a number of the odontocete species have a beak. And we're going to look at the specific features of species in just a moment. So we'll move on from that. They're well adapted for living in the marine environment. So breathing, of course, they are very adept at holding their breaths for long periods of time. Smaller cetacean species, maybe their average dive time could be 10 to 15 to 20 minutes, that sort of range. When you get up to the really big specialists like the sperm whale and the group known as the beaked whales, of which there are lots of very similar looking species in there, they can actually hold their breath for well over 2 hours. The Cuvier's beaked whale in particular, I think, has now been recorded diving to around 3,000 meters, which is pretty darn incredible. Communication and navigation is really important for these animals, and the way that they do that is through, for the odontocetes, is through echolocation. So this diagram just down at the bottom here, it looks a little bit complicated, but we'll just go through the basics of how it works. But the odontocetes, they echolocate similar to bats, and the way that happens here is just below the blowhole, they have something called the phonic lips, and they are actually what produce the echolocation clicks that they make. And it's focused out through the melon, which is the big fatty bit, their forehead essentially, into the environment. So all of those red arrows is those clicks going out into the environment. And then say it bounces off something like fish, as you can see in the diagram above, or maybe it's a boat, or maybe it's a harbour wall or the seabird, anything that's out there. It's reflected back to them. And then you can see in the bottom right corner, we've got that green arrow coming back in. And it's not picked up directly by the ear, interestingly enough. It's actually through the lower jaw, which is hollow and is filled with an auditory fat. And that actually is what picks up and transmits the sound to what's called the auditory bulla, that little green blob just at the base of the skull. And that connects to the ear, which translates up into the brain and forms a 3D picture of what's happening ahead of the animal. So this will become important later on as well when we talk about noise in the environment, for instance. So communication and navigation is really, really important for these guys. It's sound, which is the key thing for them. Another just an interesting little tidbit of a fact, they don't actively drink seawater. They have no mechanism to remove the salts from it, similar to us. All of the water that they get, and indeed seals as well, is from the breakdown of the food that they eat. And when they're undergoing periods of fasting, then it may be a breakdown of their body fats. So if they're in good nutritional condition and they've got a good fat layer, then they can continue to produce water and stay hydrated that way. Thermoregulation, of course, is also really important in temperatures that can change quite drastically, especially for those deep divers up at the surface going really, really deep into quite cold water. They have a really low surface area to body volume ratio. So that is a way that helps reduce heat loss. And they are also filled with that blubber layer, of course, which is really good at insulating them and maintaining a stable core body temperature as well. If they do overheat, or they get too cold, then they can do something pretty cool, which is that they have what's called a countercurrent heat exchange system. So basically, if they're too hot, they can flush more blood to their extremities, so their tail and their fins and their pectoral fins. Um, and that way they can dump heat out into the environment, and that helps them cool down. And they can do the reverse if they're too cold, and they'll send less blood to their extremities and hold more of that into their core, body core, so it can maintain that core body temperature again much better. So looking at the species, we'll start small and we'll get big basically here at this point. We have harbour porpoises. They're the smallest of all the cetaceans that we get in the UK. It's the only porpoise species as well. Gets up to 1.9 meters long. It doesn't have an obvious beak. It's got more of a tapered, sort of bluntish snout, really. It doesn't have that really prominent beak that some of the other species do. And it's got a really small triangular dorsal fin, which is relatively unique as well. There's not too many species that have fin shapes like that. And it's really the only cetacean species in the UK that has a dorsal fin shape like that. It does mean it can occasionally get confused with a shark. It does look a little bit shark-like. They're generally in small groups. There are a couple of places that are becoming quite well known as porpoise strongholds. So I understand research in the far north of Scotland around Orkney, and I think actually Shetland as well. They're seeing maybe larger than average groups up there, and it may be more important habitat for them in that region. But they're also pretty shy, as I'm sure many of you know. They're hard to spot, firstly because they're so small, but they also don't show well at the surface. They don't jump around very much. They just sort of travel along, porpoising at the surface, but they're not fully coming out the water. In fact, seeing the head on the photo here is actually relatively unusual for porpoises. You don't really see much of them, but they are very coastal. If you look at the charts in the bottom right corner, it gives seasonal distribution in winter and summer. And these charts are getting to be a few years old now, and with climate change, the distribution is changing of these species. And the North Sea, the southern North Sea in particular, seems to be the focus of where the population is moving to, and there perhaps are other parts of the UK that are seeing a bit less of them. So there's definitely some shifting going on around. And for you guys that are out there regularly, you're probably picking up on this if you're comparing your sightings back over the years. You might be seeing less of some species and more than others, which is really, really important, valuable data. Short-beaked common dolphins, pretty prolific, particularly if you're on the west coast of the UK. And they are spreading again, a little bit more of a warmer water species. And it's only really been in maybe the last 15 years or so that they've started being seen in numbers regularly in Scotland. And actually, anecdotally for me, it feels like in the North Sea, I'm seeing and hearing more reports, both of sightings and strandings of them, where they never normally used to be in the southern North Sea as well. They're up to around 2.5 meters long. They do have that obvious pointed beak and the more defined melon as well. And they have that typical sickle-shaped dorsal fin as well, with that yellow flash on their flanks over their chest as well, which makes them pretty distinctive. They can be in very variable group sizes. Sometimes you'll see maybe even just pairs or trios of them. If you're very lucky, you might see several hundred in sometimes what are termed superpods, traveling and feeding together. They're pretty active at the surface, usually if they're not traveling to get from A to B. You might be lucky enough to see them in those really cool feeding aggregations, maybe accompanied by gannets, sometimes other species as well in there. And it's, proper David Attenborough documentary areas, what you can see with that. And we'll touch again on that a bit later on. White-beaked dolphins, a little bit bigger, so 2.9 meters, no prizes for guessing why they are so named. They do have a white beak, funnily enough, and then variable grey and white patches on their flanks as well. Again, they're pretty robust in their head shape. They don't have a very well-defined beak. It's almost porpoise-like in appearance. It's much more tapered. And they usually can be seen in small to medium groups. And again, I'm using quite subjective terms here. Small to medium, I might be talking, less than 10 to tens of these animals. Whereas if I'm talking large groups, I might be referring to hundreds, if that helps. They can sometimes be active at the surface, maybe not quite so much in comparison to common dolphins, but they are a bit more of a colder water species, seen more frequently around the north of Scotland and in the northern North Sea as well. And again, you can see the difference in their distribution and abundance in the charts just here. But there are recognised populations of them in the northern North Sea. And also, actually, because I know there's someone from Dorset on here, there is a small population in Lyme Bay as well. Bottlenose dolphins, probably one of the more iconic species. They can get up to 4 meters long. They're pretty big. They're pretty huge and robust, pretty hefty animals. They can easily be over 500 kilos when they're fully grown. They are very, very big, very powerful animals. And again, they have generally got maybe a bit more of a plain grey colour about them, darker on top, lighter underneath. The typical sickle-shaped dorsal fin again, is usually in small to medium-sized pods. Occasionally you can get larger ones, and that's particularly true of the offshore populations, which are seldom seen close to shore, but occasionally they will venture in, and we do get sightings of maybe over 100. I'm aware of sightings of over 100 bottlenose dolphins that pass through our waters on occasionally, but generally we don't know much about those ones. We do have some more well-known inshore populations, and they're sometimes termed as resident populations, but actually in recent years, as we learn more about them and do more research, they're maybe not so resident as we originally think they are. So around the UK, the three well-known resident populations, or certainly two of them are, is the one in the Moray Firth. So for those of you on Dolphin Spirit, I know that's where you're based and you'll be incredibly familiar with your population there. We've got the Cardigan Bay population in West Wales as well, and the perhaps slightly less known of the three, which is along the south coast of England. Now, what's really interesting about these is that with more data coming in, with more collaborations and research, is that we're actually learning these residents aren't quite so resident, as I say. And I know, for instance, the Moray Firth population, they seem to be gradually heading a little bit further south and venturing further out, maybe expanding their range following food, or it could be for other reasons. But they're also frequently being seen outside of the Moray Firth, where there is a protected area for them. And they're going south down along into the North Sea, past the Firth of Forth and down into the east coast of England. So again, I know there's someone on here from Yorkshire. Some of the dolphins you're getting down that far south are actually originating from that Moray Firth population, and they're becoming established along the east coast of England as far as where you are. Which is pretty interesting. But individuals or pairs from this population have also been recorded in Denmark and Dorset and the Isle of Man and the west coast of Ireland as well. So they may be well known to us in one respect, but in some ways we still have a lot to learn about them. Now, something else bottlenose dolphins are becoming quite well known for is unfortunately duffing up harbour porpoises and other smaller cetaceans like common dolphins. And it's not a well understood behaviour. It's been recorded and filmed on a number of occasions, but the reason why they do it is not really well identified or established. It's certainly not for predation. They kill them and then they move on. They don't actually eat them or anything like that. So is it competition for resources? Is it territorial behavior? Some even suggest it might be misdirected sexual aggression from males, but there have been females observed attacking and killing these smaller cetaceans as well. So the jury still is very much out there when it comes to this quite brutal behavior. I mean, I've been involved in some post-mortem examinations of these victims, and the damage internally is absolutely incredible. Every single rib, both sides, broken, lacerated and ruptured organs, twisted spines that are dislocated, fractured skulls, you name it, it's there. It's pretty darn brutal what they do to those poor little porpoises. Moving on to Risso's dolphins, they're ever so slightly smaller actually, just 3.8 meters. They do look very, very different though. They're big, so it is easy to confuse them with bottlenose dolphins. And occasionally, actually, even orca. Sometimes people see these and think they're orca. I mean, they're big, but not orca big. And it might be because they do have some black and white colouring on them, or dark grey and white colouring on them. That might lead to the confusion. And they do have a pretty enormous dorsal fin as well. It does stick up quite a bit more than the bottlenose dolphin, if you're familiar with those. But they have this really rounded, blunt head. They don't have a beak at all. They're very, very dense at the front end of their body. They're very heavy animals. And the white that they have on their bodies, like you can see in the photo here, they're not born with that. There's usually dark grey, plain grey, pretty much when they're born. But with age, especially after they mature, and particularly for males, they will rake each other with their teeth as they interact with one another and compete for females. And generally, the older they are, the more of this white scarring from those teeth they will have on their bodies. So, more heavily scarred animals might either just be a little bit rubbish at competing, or they might be more likely older animals showing their years of experience. Small to medium groups usually for these animals. Sometimes they can be active at the surface. Sorry, I didn't really touch on that with bottlenose dolphins. Of course, as you might well know, they can be very active and interactive around vessels as well. But Risso's dolphins can be a bit more reserved, not necessarily too interested at coming over to do bow riding, although they will occasionally. But sometimes you might also see them resting, logging at the surface, which we'll touch on again later on. They're very much more a spring to autumn visitor. They tend to move south and further offshore in the winter months, and they are starting to become more prolific in the last few years around much of the UK. And they do specialist feed on cephalopods, so octopus, cuttlefish, and again, as you might well be aware, we've had a pretty impressive octopus bloom in the last year or so, and this seems to be fueling an increase in this species, the Risso's dolphin, around particularly the west coast of the UK. Another similar looking species here is the long-finned pilot whale. They are much bigger at 6.7 meters long, but they do have that really blunt, rounded head, which can be mistaken as Risso's dolphins. But the dorsal fin shape is just so much different. It's really, really chunky. It's got a really wide base, and it's actually set a little bit further forward on the body. It's not right in the middle like it is with the majority of species in this section. And if you ever do, of course, get to see them, where they get their name from is these extra long tapered pectoral fins that they have as well. They are usually seen in medium to large groups, and we've learned relatively recently from genetic studies that are done, particularly on the mass strandings of these animals. So there was some really interesting work done on some of the animals that stranded in the Isle of Lewis a couple of years ago, and from other stranding incidents elsewhere in the world. And it's actually showing that many of these animals are not directly related. And it seems to be that these are separate, smaller pods that have come together socially and are quite mixed up together. So when we see them at mass strandings, it's not all the same family group or related group of animals. It's actually several different unrelated groups that have come together, which is pretty interesting. They're a bit more of an offshore species as well. As you can see from the charts, it's uncommon to see them in close inshore circumstances. So if any of you do see pilot whales close to the coast, please do feel free to let us know at BDLR, because it's fairly likely that we're going to be very worried about them. So do call them in to us. As you can see from the charts, they tend to be out off over the continental shelf, right out in deep water. Coming into enclosed coastal shallow waters is really not normal for them, and it may well be that there's an issue with one of them. But this is when it's really important for us to be very careful about our behaviour. So some of you might be aware there was a court case very recently in Aberdeenshire involving a tour boat, which he was charged with 4 counts of harassment, 3 against bottlenose dolphins, and 1 against pilot whales. And this was an instance that two of those charges, one of them being this incident with pilot whales. He was actually found guilty of. So it's really important to be very careful how we act around these animals. Pilot whales in particular can be very, very stressy. They have very strong emotional bonds with one another. And if one of them gets into trouble, it's likely that if that one strands, the rest of the group will follow and will also get stranded. But it has also been known that human activity has caused strandings as well. So if pilot whales are in the area, my best advice, just give them a completely wide berth. Just really avoid them, in fact, as they can already be quite disoriented and stressed, and we don't want to be adding to that. Um, excuse me. So they have occasionally active behaviour at the surface. You might see them rushing at the surface, occasional breaching. But again, they can be relatively lazy at the surface, actually. They'll be logging, not moving around very much. But what you can see in the photo here is one of them lifting its head out of the water, and this is called spy hopping. Sometimes it's behaviour shown out of curiosity. But in pilot whales, if they're grouped together in quite a dense bunch and there's lots of spy hopping going on, it is actually more of a stress indicator amongst that group as well. So again, if you do come across these animals, that might be a behavior that you're seeing, and it's something to be worried about too. Orca, again, another really iconic species here. They're just short of 10 meters long when they're fully grown. They have quite a tapered head shape with no real obvious beak. And there's two types of dorsal fin in here, which is quite nicely shown in the video, in the photo here. So we've got the big male. Some of you might know who this animal is. It's Jonco from the West Coast community in Scotland, and he's got that very distinctive notch at the base. So Jonco's a big male. He's got the really big, tall, straight dorsal fin. And then the juveniles and adult females, they have the more typical sickle-shaped dorsal fin, which you can see illustrated well there. There's usually in relatively small groups, occasionally even alone, actually. Jonco is usually accompanied by a second male called Aquarius. They're the last two known animals surviving from the West Coast community, sadly. But they do sometimes split up and then they rejoin together. I think they were seen just over the weekend on around the Isle of Skye, if I'm not mistaken. They did have a brief trip to Cornwall a few weeks ago, which was quite interesting. That's the second time they've been down that far in the past few years. They're usually traveling pretty quickly. Sometimes you might be lucky enough to see feeding behavior. Some of them specialist feed on marine mammals, including seals and small cetaceans. Others are more specialist fish feeders. And this time of the year seems to be exceptionally good for orca sightings, particularly around the far north of Scotland. I know there's an event going on at the moment called Orca Watch that's been running for a few years. And there's lots of people out up around Orkney, Shetland, and Caithness, the Highlands, looking for orca, as it seems to be a particularly good time for them right now. Moving on to mustached Mysticetes whales, we start off with the minke whale. This is the smallest of all of the Mysticetes, the baleen whales in here, 9.5 meters fully grown. They have the little hooked, typical sickle-shaped dorsal fin, which is about 2/3 of the way back along their body. It's pretty small in relation to their body size. And they're distinctive if you do get to see the pectoral fins, as they've got white bands around each of them. They're usually on their own. Occasionally you might see mothers and calves together. If you've got a good feeding area, then you might see multiple animals gathering together to take advantage of that as well. And you might occasionally see surface activity like breaching. It's rare. If you're lucky enough to see it, then that's absolutely amazing. I've managed to see it once, a little bit by luck. One of those instances where you're looking in the right direction at the right time, and it was just there a long way out. It was absolutely amazing. So usually they are relatively sedate. They're traveling or they're feeding, and they don't tend to do a lot else. If they're curious about vessels, it will tend to be younger animals as well, from our experience too. And they do seem to peak in numbers throughout the summer. I know particularly for us in the southwest that April and September are peak months of sightings. In Scotland it might be ever so slightly different, and in the North Sea, but you can find them mostly around the majority of the UK. Humpback whales, well worth mentioning because they're becoming more prolific around most of the UK in the last few years. We're a little bit unsure why still at the moment. It could be due to population recovery from the days of whaling. It is a conservation success story, so that's the good news. The mixed news might be that they are being affected by climate change and they're having to redistribute as their food sources are moving from one place to another. And maybe the slightly bad news story to put that in the mix as well is that because they are losing some of their food sources and prey is becoming harder to find, is that they might not be completing full migrations because they're not quite as fit as they should be. So these are all theories. It's a bit speculation at the moment, but it could be a mixture of a combination of these reasons that are the reason for many more humpback whales turning up and staying around in UK waters in the past few years.
Dan,
Not moving.
you've got just over 15 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. They're pretty iconic again. They're really easy to identify. They can occasionally, of course, get mixed up maybe with a fin whale or if it's a small humpback, it could be mixed up with a fin whale. But they get to 16 meters when they're fully grown. They've got quite variable shapes to their dorsal fins as well. Some of them are that sickle hook shaped one. Some of them can be triangular. Some of them actually just a bit of a bump even. So they're quite variable in their shape. They've got those enormous, ridiculously enormous pectoral fins that flap around all over the place, and they can sometimes be pretty active at the surface, breaching, tail slapping, head slapping, fin slapping. They do a lot of slapping when they're active, the humpback whales, but generally a lot of the behaviour that we see around the UK with our humpbacks is feeding. So they're taking advantage of good food sources in particular areas. Again, they are usually alone, but when you've got a good food source, you might start to attract crowds and you might see multiple animals in similar places too. Now, humpback whales are also well known for being able to be photo identified. This is actually true of any animal, and you're going to hear a lot more about Sue's amazing work with seals when we come on to her presentation later on during this course. But humpback whales, it's maybe a little bit of a myth that you can only identify them by getting a picture of the underside of their flukes. Not true. You can identify them from any body part as long as there's a matching photo out there from someone else, somewhere, someday else, from another part of the world. You can still match those markings you can see on the pectoral fin of this one here that's breaching, maybe even from the markings around its mouth as well. They're all unique to every animal. And so there are ID projects for not only these, but for bottlenose dolphins, for Risso's dolphins. Some people out there are doing, I think there's a fin whale catalogue out there somewhere as well. So it helps us find out a lot more about our animals and where they're getting to. And humpback whales around the UK have been connected to the Arctic Circle, to Cape Verde, which is a breeding ground, and also to the Caribbean, specifically Dominica, the Dominican Republic, and that's another more significant breeding ground as well. So we're well connected in the UK, even from just the few animals that have been photo identified so far. And hopefully with more data in the future, we'll learn a heck of a lot more about them, but it'll help us do more to protect them as well. Fin whales, the largest species that we get in the UK, second only in the world to blue whales. They're 24 meters fully grown. Again, with that similar shape, sickle-shaped dorsal fin 2/3 the way back along their body. The unique thing about them is that they have an asymmetric jaw colouring. So the right-hand side of the jaw is a greyish-white colour, and so is the baleen that's inside, if you see the mouth open. The left-hand side is plain grey, like a dark grey colour. If you see another species called the sei whale, it's really, really rare in our waters, maybe because it's mistaken for fin whales and assumed to be that sometimes. But sei whales don't have the white right jaw, only the fin whales do. Again, usually alone, possibly small groups, occasionally active behaviour at the surface. It's really rare, to be honest, to see them active at the surface. They're either just swimming or feeding, but seeing them feed is just absolutely magnificent. They are just so huge and so powerful. It's brilliant. And they again do seem to be increasing a bit around the UK. Again, you can see from the charts that winter, it looks like there's not many around. We are getting more sightings of them in winter, actually. But we also do get a bit of a summer peak. And I know for us in the southwest, that tends to happen around July, August, when we get a bit of a peak as well as in the winter months. So we've talked about a lot of species there. So again, apologies if you already know lots and lots of that. Hopefully there might have been one or two new facts in there for you. For those of you who don't know much about cetaceans, then you've got lots of new stuff to be thinking about when you're out on the water. There's so many different species and they're so variable in their appearances and their behaviors. And that's what we're going to look at a little bit more now, are some of the general common behaviors that you'll see cetaceans doing. So I've mentioned it a few times already. Traveling, also known as porpoising, when they're just moving along the surface with regular motion, and you can see usually it's just their back, not always their head and their full head coming above the surface. But you'll see them just traveling along, back and dorsal fin, back and dorsal fin, back and dorsal fin to get from A to B. So this is something that you'll see pretty often with any of them, pretty much. Resting or logging. So I mentioned this in particular with relation to pilot whales and Risso's dolphins, because it is a behavior you do tend to see more often with them, but you can see it with bottlenoses and others as well. So this logging behavior, whoops, just play that again. Hopefully the video is coming through for you okay there. So being pretty lazy at the surface, not moving very much, maybe actually spending extended periods just staying at the surface fully. So if you see animals that are resting, obviously we don't want to be too close to them. If they decide to drift over towards you, that's fine. It's on their terms, and then they can leave on their terms again. That's all important stuff we'll touch on again later. But if they're resting, the thing that we don't want to do is go over and wake them up and disturb their sleep. We wouldn't be happy with that. Why should they? Feeding. So sometimes we might be alerted to cetacean presence by the presence of birds. So things like gannets, kittiwakes that are feeding at the surface and diving under as well. And if it's a really good food source, you might end up with these massive feeding frenzies that I mentioned earlier on. And quite often you'll see things like common dolphins in association with this, and they're all working together on a big food source, bait ball, bringing it up to the surface. The gannets are diving down. The dolphins are coming in from the side and underneath to get their fill as well. Occasionally, it might include other species. So bluefin tuna, occasionally have been recorded, maybe even a minke whale or two, all getting into the mix here. So really absolutely fascinating behavior. And again, they're working really hard to get that food source and to do all of that coordination between them to bring that shoal of fish into a position up against the surface where they can feed and get all of their energy from as well. So again, when we see behavior like this, we don't want to be getting in the way. We don't want to be cutting in front. We don't want to be driving through or over, because that could disrupt that entire feeding effort. And they've spent a lot of energy putting that together, and we've just sailed on through and dispersed a whole lot, and that's just wasted a whole load of energy. So they'll be in a negative energy deficit, and that obviously is not good for them, especially if they've got calves in there that are trying to learn to how to take care of themselves and are dependent on their mum being fit and healthy too. Breaching, this is when they're mostly or fully coming out of the water. Bottlenose dolphins can be pretty acrobatic if you've seen them. They can be pretty show-offy. They can be doing somersaults, spins, turns in the air. Common dolphins, especially youngsters, they can be really hyperactive at the surface. It's just an absolute joy to see them just splashing around and sometimes leaping repeatedly very, very high out of the water as well. It seems to be much more of a social behavior. And you'll see it sometimes when they come over to interact with vessels, and that includes when they're bow riding, which we'll come to in a moment. Now, something that needs a little bit more context is slapping of various body parts, whether it's the tail, fin, or the head. Sometimes it can be a social behavior. Sometimes it can be a warning to us. If they're not happy with our presence for whatever reason, maybe they've had a bad experience before we came along with another boat or kayak or what have you, and they might be in a bit of a bad mood. So tail slapping might be a bit of a warning for them, telling us we're not in a good mood today, you need to back off and give us some space. So take some cues from the animal's behavior. If they're doing this kind of behavior, it might be a good idea to limit your time with them, back off much further than you might normally be, and give them lots more space. Something's obviously amiss with them, whether it's caused by social or their own species or another species, or Whether it's human related can sometimes be difficult to tell. So again, context can be really important in this sort of case. Investigating or spy hopping. So I mentioned earlier that juvenile minke whales and others, they can be maybe a little bit more curious about boats. When they're very young, they naturally are a bit more curious, so they will come over and investigate. And you might even see dolphin mothers bringing over calves to come close to boats and practice bow riding and that sort of thing as well. And I mentioned spy hopping too, which we saw a photo of earlier with the pilot whales when they're lifting their whole head above the water to check out what's happening around them. If you've just got an individual that does it once every now and again, it's pretty safe to say it's just being curious. But specific to the pilot whales, as I said earlier, if you've got lots of them, you'll probably see lots of heads coming up and much more stressed behavior. So again, that specific context is really important to know. Bow riding, this is something that we all love to see when we're just sailing, cruising along, and they come over and join us and use the bow wave or the wake wave as well and follow along with us. And you get these amazing sights of them dashing around underneath the bow of the vessel. And you get some really amazing wildlife watching experience and lots of happy clients that are seen and sharing in this experience as well. As I briefly mentioned earlier on, interactions really need to be on the animal's terms. If they choose to come over to you, great. When they choose to leave, let them go. Don't try and chase after them or start speeding up and trying to encourage them back. That can start to become into the realm of disturbance where we're chasing after them, trying to force them into a behavior that they've chosen they don't want to do anymore. So again, it's really important to take cues from the animal's behavior. If they've had enough, we let them go and we go somewhere else. So our behavior, how does that all kind of fit in together? Well, arriving and leaving at encounters with animals, we don't want to be zooming in at high speed. There's potential there for a lot of disturbance, both from the noise and the risk of vessel strike. We also want to leave nice and calmly as well. So it's important to remember that all the way through your encounter that you need to be in control of your vessel and what's happening on board it as well. So this is maybe something that we're easy to get a bit overexcited about, particularly for recreational water users as well. Is when they come across animals, they get a bit excited and a little bit of common sense does go out of the window. So they for as quickly as they can because they're excited to see them. And then once they've disappeared and gone and they spot something else, they zoom off really quickly to go and check that out as well. But we want everything to be nice and calm and importantly, as quiet as we can be as well. So referring back to earlier on in this presentation where sound is really important for these animals, if we're doing lots of loud activity around them, like turns and fast maneuvers, and maybe there's multiple boats around at the same time as well, that's a lot of noise for them to contend with and to sort of untangle what's exactly going on around them. And if they can't hear properly and they can't communicate between themselves properly, it can lead on to a lot of stress and disorientation for these animals as well. So we need to
5 minutes.
allow. Okay, thanks, Steve.
Sorry, no worries.
So we need to allow them space. If there are multiple vessels around, try not to box them in, and especially if you're in shallow water, that we're not accidentally herding them up against the coast and they can't dive and escape. So we want to leave escape routes for them. So preferably have vessels around on one side rather than surrounding them. We want to be aware of our direction and speed as well. So we maintain a stable course, no fast and sudden turns. And if we're going really fast and they come over and join us and we become aware that they're around us, then we'll slow down gradually to a no wake speed and then we'll just motor along gently. So you can see in the left-hand photo, there's not much speed and direction change going on in there. The dolphins are probably going to outmaneuver that little yacht, and what an amazing experience that they're having. But what the photo doesn't perhaps show is that there's actually multiple of those yachts around. There's quite a big crowd of them. Again, that context is important. Whereas the other photo here, we can see 4 different vessels doing all different things. The one that's just slightly cut off on the far right is actually stationary, so that's good. The next one in from the right is heading towards the stationary vessel at a slow speed. So that also is good. and they're allowing the animals to head off away from them, and they've got an escape route. The other two are more of a problem. The one that's more in the middle, in the background, going really fast, not sure whether they've seen the dolphins or not. That's going to be creating a lot of noise. And then we've got the other boat on the left with someone water skiing. Most of the people on board seem to be completely unaware of what's happening in front of them, and they're heading directly towards not only dolphins, but other vessels. So are they fully in control of what they're doing, and is that safe? That's really, really important here. But they are heading straight towards those dolphins, and that is dangerous. So the context here is really good. This photo is quite illustrative of all those different behaviors. So we're just going to look at a little bit of research now before we wrap up. So this is porpoise reaction to vessel behavior. And there's three charts here. So if we look at the left-hand one, this is what happens to porpoises when vessels change direction and move towards them. So there's no positive action, positive response from the porpoises, no matter what vessel type it is. We've got a neutral for fishing boats. You can see a little bit of neutral reaction, but by and large, it's pretty much uniformly negative. The porpoises dive, they disappear, they move away, all negative things. If the vessel is in transit and carries along its course, then it's a little bit more mixed. So there's a little bit of positive in there, interestingly, from the small ferry, but mostly neutral responses. And then when we also get a few negative responses in there as well. For those of you that know porpoises well, you will know that they disturb very, very easily. So they can be a good yardstick to measure how other animals might be feeling, no matter whether it's common dolphins or bottlenose dolphins or whatever. Porpoises, being the most maybe delicate of all of our species, they're the ones that we should treat with the most care, but we should do that with all of the species, not just the porpoises. With vessels that stop and move away on the right-hand side chart there, we can see again it's largely, or well, entirely neutral responses from the porpoises there. So hopefully this sort of gives you that impression about how porpoises feel about what vessels do. And then this other chart here is an interesting one. It's the minutes taken to return to a foraging area after a vessel has moved through. So you can see different vessel types here. We've got the dark blue as a small ferry, and it was relatively variable, but more sort of at the lower end, 1 to 2 to 3 minutes or so. The large ferry, on the other hand, had quite a big reaction, and the porpoises didn't return for up to 6 minutes afterwards in that case. And it may be that the larger vessel with a louder engine was the reason for that as well. Quite mixed again with the fishing boat, but again, relatively quick to come in. And what's interesting is the speedboat. So what I can probably surmise from this is that maybe the speedboat that the porpoises returned to the area within 2 minutes perhaps was traveling very quick and didn't stay in the area, and therefore was well out of the way very, very quickly, and the porpoises therefore returned quickly, whereas the ones that took longer to return, perhaps the speedboat was circling in the area or stayed within the vicinity, and that might be why it took longer for them to come back. So again, different vessel types have different reactions to these species. This chart here gives you hopefully a little bit of insight into evasive behavior that cetaceans take when they are disturbed or when they're trying to get away from a source of disturbance. So this shows here the three triangles of the dolphins. The orange sort of boxy thing is the vessel, and then the yellow arrows, of course, showing the direction of travel. So the boat is within about 50 meters in this study of the dolphins and is traveling along directly behind them, i.e. following them or potentially chasing them. So what the dolphins do is actually veer off to the right, show themselves, and then do a big U-turn and go around to the left. So they're very clever. They're actually trying to misdirect and get the boat to go in one direction while they nip around behind in the other way and get behind them. So if you're seeing behavior like that, if you're sort of out on your boat and you're seeing dolphins in front of you and then suddenly they're way off over to the side or behind you, they're probably showing evasive behavior, and they're again taking your cues from their behavior. You probably just want to keep your distance and leave those animals alone. So we're just about finished here. So we've got some best practice information for you here. So when we're out on our trip or a paddleboard or kayak or so on, we don't approach directly from behind. We don't approach from the front, directly at the front, nor do we cut across their direction of travel. We'll gradually slow down to an awake speed, and we don't get between mothers and calves either. Of course, that will be the worst thing, is to split them up and give them room to escape if they want to. So again, if there's other vessels around or close to the coast or in shallow water, we try not to box them in. We don't approach within 100 meters. If they choose to get closer, again, like I said earlier, that's on their terms, but we don't drive through the pod and get close to them in that respect. We don't stay longer than 15 minutes. Remember, there are many other vessels and craft out on the water. They will be having repeated interactions with them throughout the day. So limiting our time means that they've got more time to do their social behaviours, their feeding behaviours, and so on. And if other vessels approach as well, then try to manage where you all are between you so you're not boxing them in, and give them space to leave and give them more space as well. So stay further out than 100 meters. I'll just touch on a few unusual situations. So first is species in unfamiliar habitats. So for me, with my BDMLR hat on, that will be largely common dolphins coming up into rivers or enclosed areas like harbours and marinas. They can become disoriented in those environments. They're not used to being in there, and they can easily get confused, especially if it's intertidal, estuarine, mud flats or sandbanks. They just seem to really struggle to navigate their way in and out of those, and it can lead to stranding. So if you see species where you don't normally see them, that potentially could be an issue, and we want to give those animals lots of space. Strandings, of course, when it comes to animals that are alive, there's the BDMLR hotline that you can ring for the immediate advice for first aid that you can do. One of the key things is to not just chuck it back in the water immediately, because sometimes these animals strand because they are sick, injured, maybe even dying. And stranding is a symptom of them no longer coping. So we can deploy, obviously, our trained volunteer network and equipment and vets, most importantly, to come out and deal with those as if appropriate for their situation. Entanglements, we do sometimes get large whales that are spotted that are entangled at sea. We have a specialist large whale disentanglement team that can come out to deal with those. And again, just another unusual situation that's maybe a little more relevant for you guys is what we term solitary sociable animals. So we do occasionally get individuals, usually bottlenose dolphins, usually males, that turn up and start interacting much more heavily with humans. And this behavior can develop over time, and it's not really well understood why they do this. It could be that they've been rejected from their pod or they've chosen to leave, we just don't know. But they turn to humans as a source of social interactions. And over time, as more and more of this happens, they become a lot bolder and they start to develop these behaviors, and they can become quite unusual animals, to the point that some of them will actually follow behind boats. And I know at least two animals that we've had in the UK do this. They will put the end of their beak on the center of a spinning propeller to slow it down and stop it. So that's a huge risk of actually having their head taken off. And sadly, some of them have when they do those kinds of behaviors, which is why we need to be so careful around them. If we have social solitary animals around in the UK, we tend to be involved with managing them with the Marine Management Organisation or NatureScot or the police and so on, just because it's very easy for human behaviour to get out of hand, but also the dolphins' behaviour, and there have been injuries on both sides when we have those animals around in more extreme cases. So last slide now, nearly finished. Sorry for overrunning slightly again. Hopefully better than last time though. There's various laws that govern disturbance and protection around cetaceans. So there's various ones here that protect different species to different distances from the shore. So there's the habitats and species regulations. There's inshore and offshore versions of that. You can see at the top there. Now translated into UK law, since these were originally EU laws from before Brexit. A key one is the Wildlife and Countryside Act. That tends to be the one that's used most often when it comes to disturbance. And again, as Sue covered at the beginning of the course, it's that wording of deliberate or reckless disturbance that's really key in here as well. Along with the additional words that you can see involving capture, killing, keeping, transporting, selling, or exchanging any live or dead cetacean, including parts, so teeth, bones, fins, anything. If something washes up dead and someone's taking bits off of it, it's illegal unless you have a license to hold it. So usually that would be museums, universities, the recording networks that take them for post-mortem examination and so on. There are various special areas of conservation around the UK for different cetacean species. So porpoises are covered in the parts of the Celtic Sea, bottlenose dolphins in Cardigan Bay, the Moray fur, minke whales in the Hebrides as well. So there's a few of these around. So wherever you are, it's worth becoming familiar with if there are specially designated areas for your region and for certain species too. That's me done. I will pass back to Zoe and Sue.
Thank you very much, Dan. Well done. We now have the quiz, don't we, Zoe? Okay, so this is go on, Dan. This is your first quiz of the night. There are 5 questions, and it's hopefully you can all see it. Can you do a quick thumbs up if you can see it? Yeah, we've got nodding and thumbs up. Brilliant. So there's 5 questions. Scroll down, and we will stay quiet to allow you the opportunity to read. I'm going to be able to tell who did what. So just go with your instincts and don't worry. Got 2 people completed.
Yeah, I can see some answers coming in. That's fantastic, guys. Sorry, I know that was a huge amount of information that I just threw at you then, but as Claire has put in the chat, if you do have any questions, you're welcome to type them in there, and I'll answer them throughout the rest of this evening. Also, actually, I meant to say at the beginning, tell us about your most amazing wildlife sighting as well, particularly if it was cetaceans for me. Wherever it was, whenever it was, it'll be lovely to hear of your experiences and what you've seen out there too. Anything really unusual as well, a rare species maybe. That'd be fantastic to hear more about what you guys have seen out there.
Got 2 still to come. 1 still to come.
Give that, yeah. Okay, poll ended. Thanks, Zoe. Okay, we'll just run through the answers for these ones then. So question 1, cetaceans are sensitive to underwater noise. And why is that? So there's multiple choices here. It masks their ability to hunt for food, interferes with their communication, makes it harder for them to navigate, or all of the above. So, I mean, all of the answers actually are correct, but it is all of the above. It interferes with absolutely everything. So this is why, especially when there's multiple boats or other vessels operating in an area, that sound, to use the pun, is just amplified in the effect that it has on our cetaceans. They're very, very sensitive to sound. Question 2, what's the best way to move around dolphins? So we've got head on, to follow them, to move parallel to them, and stay 100 meters away, or all of the above. Well, thank goodness none of you put all of the above on that one. So ideally, yes, we want to stay 100 meters away. If they choose to come closer and it's on their terms, that's absolutely fine. So that's something that we're very, very aware of at WiSe. Is sometimes people on social media, they see a picture of a boat and there's dolphins nearby and they say, you should be 100 meters away. Well, you can't stop a wild animal from choosing to come to you. Obviously, we know that and you know that, but members of the public who are maybe a bit less aware don't always know that. So that's something that we're always sort of trying to firefight and back up what you guys do out there, because we know that you're not necessarily breaking any rules, and let's remember they're all voluntary essentially, about distances. It's not legal, and that we need to be very careful about how that's presented as well. So yeah, 100 meters away, move parallel as well. So great that some of you got that one there. Question 3, when calves are present, should you get closer as they're smaller and harder to see? Do we avoid separating mothers and calves, so don't drive between them? Operate more carefully? Yeah, of course. Or all of the above. So yeah, the middle two answers, all of you got those. That was fantastic. So yeah, we avoid getting between the mothers and calves. We operate more carefully because the youngsters might be less adept at moving out of the way of vessels, and the risk of strike is higher. Equally, we shouldn't discriminate here, but older animals as well, they might be a little bit slower too, and they might also struggle to get out of the way. So we always need to remember that too. Question 4, which species tends to be the most shy around watercraft? Is it minke whales? A few of you went for that. Yeah, kind of, but maybe just through their sort of apathy towards us, perhaps, because they're quite big. They're maybe a little less interested in us. Humpback whales, maybe. They can be a bit sensitive sometimes. Bottlenose dolphins, common dolphins, not really, but can be. But yeah, harbour porpoises, the majority, if you got that one there, it's harbour porpoises that are the most sensitive to what's going on around them. Quite flighty. And last question, how much do you feel you've learned about cetaceans tonight? You knew it all. Fantastic. You're really, really experienced and hopefully sharing lots of your amazing knowledge with lots and lots of people that you meet out on your trips. You knew a little. That's good. You knew a lot, quite a few of you. Fantastic. And some of you keen to learn more, which is always nice to know as well. So thank you very much for your answers, guys. I'm going to stop sharing now and we'll move on.
Lovely, well done, Dan. And you've got a nice comment from Zoltan about his interest in sighting a humpback whale and a fin whale, not at the same time, but in the Bewley and Inverness Firth. Quite unusual sightings in those shallow water areas near Inverness. That sounds utterly amazing, Zoltan. Thank you for sharing that. Zoe, I'm going to suggest that we don't do the time to talk and that we just go straight on to the break. She's nodding, so that's a good sign. So you've got 10 minutes break, quick loo trip, quick drink trip, whatever it is you fancy, quick walkabout, and we'll see you back here at 25 past.
I was going to say, should we do 20 past?
20 past, all right then. 20 past. She's a hard slave driver, is Claire.
Yeah.
She's
not serious.
Not really. We just got to get a lot to get through, haven't we?
Yeah.
See you back at 20 past. Thank you. So I need somebody to tell me when I've got 15 minutes and when I've got 5 minutes, please. I don't know whether that's helpful, Dan, or not. Is it helpful or not?
Oh, sorry, say it again, Steve.
I'm hoping somebody will tell me when I've got 15 minutes and 5 minutes, but I don't know if that's helpful. Did you find it helpful?
I did, yes, but obviously
Okay.
it didn't stop me.
Well, everything that you say, Dan, is super interesting. But yeah, I'll try my best. So yeah, if you tell me I've got 15 and 5, that would be super helpful, I think. Meanwhile, good idea to get my talk open, isn't it?
How long's your talk now? Is that the
so I've got 35 minutes.
35 minutes. Okay.
And I've added stuff to my presentation, which is never a good idea, is it? Right. So I've got to finish by 20 past. Fiber's made a world of difference, hasn't it? Videos played brilliantly. I was just saying, Claire, the fibre made a world of difference.
Oh yes, it did.
Yeah, I'd like some of that, Dan. Can I get fibre at my place, please? We've been trying. We've been trying.
Yeah, it was really difficult because when you go online and you type in your address and it says like it's not available in your area.
Yep.
So I was talking to actually Sue. You need to get Loz to send over the contact details for Primary PC Solutions because they're the ones that sorted me out. And they had to go back to BT and get me registered or something before I became eligible for it. So you probably can get it. It might just be that no one out there does the thing that gets you registered to have it at your address.
So, Dan, we've had our broadband from Primary PC for about 4 years.
Yeah, that's what's really interesting because we know other houses, some of our neighbours have fibre, but when you type in your address to see if you're eligible, it says no, you're not. But Kieran, he actually went on Street View and he saw the house literally opposite us has got the box at the front of their house, so it definitely is available. It's just that BT or whoever it is hasn't updated their records to say that you
Yeah,
can
it's
get
really
it for
annoying,
whatever
isn't it?
reason. I suppose with so many addresses, it's really hard to fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it might be well worth you looking at that.
No, we get it from them already. We've had it from them for 4 years.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. Highly recommend them.
Give me the name again, Dan, Sue.
Kieran Williams from Primary PC.
Primary PC. Okay.
They're based in the back of Helston up the Cobar Valley.
Okay.
Is your provider Fidelity or a different one? Because obviously we're with Primary PC, but they were using Primary Fidelity. Dan's busy answering questions.
Yeah.
It's all right, Dan.
Sure
Focus on the questions.
Yeah.
Much more important than me and Claire talking about fibre broadband. Come on, Gareth, what's your most fantastic sighting?
I haven't really. I mean, I became a BWR medic about 8 months ago.
Yeah.
I've seen stuff in the States, whale watching and stuff, but
Oh, come on
yeah,
then. What have you seen in the States?
Sorry?
What have you seen in the States?
Well, you know, it's so long ago. But yes, we went out of Boston, and they offer the if you don't see it, come back. So I think we came back. I think we went on 4 trips before we saw one.
Bargain.
But yeah, so no, as a BWR medic, it's great to see kind of what best practice is.
Yeah.
But also as a powerboat instructor, I think increasingly people are buying boats and watching nature and getting involved with nature, you know, is one of the prime motivations. And so, you know, I'm just keen that there might be opportunities to slip in some of this messaging, you know, at the appropriate times.
That'd be fantastic. Thanks, Gareth. Really good to do.
No worries. Well, I think, yeah, Dan's obviously a familiar face, but so are you from the monthly SRT.
Oh, lovely.
Online
Thanks,
lectures, which are
Gareth.
brilliant. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you enjoy them. That's
And
good.
I hadn't realised the Zoe connection, but the Christmas cards are fantastic.
She's a fantastic illustrator, isn't she?
Yeah,
well, she's super talented at everything, but
yeah,
design work is second to none, really.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a small happy family.
It is, absolutely. Yes, indeed. Okay, if we're back, can we put our cameras on, please? So we know you're back. Lovely. Thanks, Holly. Fantastic, Yannick. Thank you. I do really love that background. So supernatural. It's lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen and I'm going to press my start button on my timer. I've asked to be reminded when it is 15 minutes to go and 5 minutes to go. Okay, does that look correct, Dan? That's showing?
It's looking fine for me, Sue.
Excellent. All right then. So I'm here to talk about seabirds, which can be an utterly spectacular sight. I love to describe this one as snowing gannets. I don't understand how they manage to go so close to shore with reefs and somehow manage to still dive in safe places and come bobbing back up to sit on the water, but more of gannets later. Okay, so the law and birds. There's the Wildlife and Countryside Act, which has now been, it is a UK Act. It is the key Wildlife Act that we're hoping at some point to get seals added to. And it is the EU Birds Directive and the Habitats Directive transposed. However, the Wildlife and Countryside Act makes it illegal to kill, injure, or take any wild bird, intentionally take, damage, or destroy any nest while it is in use, intentionally take or destroy an egg, or intentionally and recklessly, they've got those words again, disturb any wild bird that's listed in Schedule 1. So things like peregrines and choughs. Certain species are also protected through the designation of special protection areas. So on the south coast here, we have diver special protection areas for black-throated divers and other red-throated divers and so on. So you need to know what your local designations are on your patch. We did suggest that you have a look at some of the designations on Magic Maps. Some of you would have been able to do that on your patch. Some of you might have struggled with Magic Maps. Magic Maps has not been behaving for me, even though I've used it multiple times historically. It's not been working for me, but I know it's been working for the other WiSe directors. Okay, so wherever you are in the UK, you've got really important seabirds. 1.4 million seabirds in Wales, 22% of the global population of lesser blackback gulls in England. Scotland, 1/3 of Europe's breeding seabirds. 1/3 of Europe's breeding seabirds. Scotland's stronghold, or what? 43% of the continent's, that's Europe's common guillemots, and 11% of black-legged kittiwakes, which are obviously struggling and potentially moving south a little bit in response to climate change. Northern Ireland, Rathlin Island, is the largest seabird colony in Northern Ireland, with over 250,000 birds breeding during the nesting season. So basically, it doesn't really matter where you are in the UK, you've got important seabird areas near you. Key things to look at. Well, depending on where you look, it says we've got 25 or 26 seabird species in the UK. So I'm going with the one that says 26, and I'm going to be consistent with that. Seabirds spend 90% of their time at sea. And how do you identify them? I'm not going to spend too long on this, I hope. But basically, key things to focus in on are the beak and its shape and colour, the legs, colour and length, the wings, what kind of shape are they, any patterns in the coloration of the bird, and the silhouette, particularly when it's flying. So hopefully some of you will know what this bird is, but we'll come back to it. So disturbance is always a waste of energy and can lead to predation and death for seabirds. So this is a comic tern. I generally don't know the difference between common and Arctic terns. However, when I was forced to sort this out, I actually decided that this one is more likely to be a common tern. Common terns have got orangey beaks and stuff. They've got black, dark tips and longer legs than the Arctic terns. And the Arctic terns are the utterly amazing ones. They're the ones that breed in the Arctic and then fly to the Antarctic for the summer. So they do both Arctics and they circumnavigate the globe, which is utterly incredible. So if you mess with one of these and disturb it while it's resting or feeding, that's a big impact on it because of its huge migration that it has to do. I'm going to be honest, this is my favourite seabird, a fulmar, absolutely love it. One of the things I particularly love about it are its smudgy black mascara around its eyes. I don't know if you knew, but that's the equivalent of a sunglass for a fulmar, sunglasses. So it helps to protect glare going into their eyes. They're part of the oh God, what's the matter with my brain today? They're part of the albatross family. That's why they've got this tubed beak. The little bit at the top is so that they can excrete salt from their beaks. I think most people know that they can chuck up fishy vomit. The question is, did you know that they can live to 44 years old, which is utterly incredible? Obviously, you know, I'm not that old yet. They have a single egg. Any bird that has a single egg is particularly vulnerable to disturbance. If it loses that egg, that's it for the whole breeding season. These are the birds that stay on the nest the very longest. They can be there until September on the cliffs because they can be on the nest for 20 weeks, which is a hugely long period of time. At wind force 5 or above, which is when it's starting to get windy, they can actually fly using as little energy as they do sitting on the nests. So if you've ever watched a former coming up at the cliffs, I love watching them playing chicken with the cliffs, and they just do a last minute turn and the legs are dangling. But if you watch them circle around cliffs, often they do it without any wing beats whatsoever when the wind is good enough. And that's when they fly the most. That's when they'll go to the mid-Atlantic ridge and they'll go to feed. Can't get over that. I think that's utterly amazing. Okay, they will prospect on nests for years before they will actually lay an egg. The ones on this ledge have laid 2 eggs, but neither of them have ever been successful. So we're hoping that this year might be different. 2 pairs, obviously we've got an interloper. They're very chatty with raspy, croaky voices, so you can usually hear them before you can see them. On to gannets. I think most people know that this is one of the most amazing big birds, seabirds that we've got, and they are amber listed. They start as black when they're a chick, and then they end up with this gorgeous yellow neck and head when they're breeding. They can live up to 27. They again only have 1 egg, and again they can be on the nest for 20 weeks. So it's really important for a long period of time that we give them extra space. The one on the left was a bit shocking. We were doing a routine boat survey off the coast and found this one dead with gear, fishing gear, chafe gear from bottom trawling around its neck, down its throat. What was even more shocking, and I'm pretty sure it would have been a mercy, somebody decided that it was struggling, and so they decided that they would help kill it, which was likely to be a mercy thing, but they did it with a shotgun pellet. The post-mortem on that bird showed that the shotgun pellet wasn't powerful enough to get through the skull. That's how strong their skulls are to resist that dive that they do at a ridiculous speed. So the other secret fact I love about them is that when you look at the feet, they've got these green little stripes all the way down the digits that they've got in their feet. I love that. They look utterly spectacular when they're diving, and they can be an utter and complete torpedo. Bass Rock is the world's largest northern gannet colony with about 90,000 birds. However, by 2023, likely as a result of avian flu as well, that was down by 2/3 to 60,000 birds. So they are struggling, and I'm sure you've heard that when they've had avian flu, their eyes go black. One of my favourite species, kittiwakes, they'll be on the nest for about 10 weeks and they can have 2 eggs. It always amazes me for a monochrome bird that when it actually opens its beak, it's got this fantastic coloration inside its beak, no longer monochrome. They look very much like gulls, but they look like the ends of their wings have been dipped in ink, which is why they're completely black. They don't have the mirrors that gulls have, and they're black-legged kittiwakes, and you can see that's very descriptive. They've got wonderful red outlines around their eyes, and their beaks are yellow. Okay. This is a kittiwake ledge. They build up these nests from year to year if they don't get destroyed by the wind or the waves or whatever. They face heavy predation by blackback gulls. This is one of Zoe's photos from Wales, Ramsey Island. The chicks are born white and light grey and downy. The parents regurgitate food to feed them. And the chicks are very vulnerable because they can't regulate their body temperature. The one thing that's quite interesting is they perform siblicide, where the stronger chick might actually eat and kill and eat the weaker sibling. Okay, no survey I've ever been on, I haven't had the question, what's the difference between a shag and a guillemot? I absolutely love that question. Hopefully, you can tell if I say to you that guillemot's got a white thigh patch, you can tell which one it is. And if I say to you that the shag during the breeding season has a crest on top of its head, you can now tell the difference between them.
Cormorant. So
what did I say?
Guillemot.
Oh, guillemot, for God's sake. Yes. Thank you very much for correcting me. I don't even know the difference, apparently. This is a cormorant for sure, much bigger than a shag actually, and it has this white thigh patch. Thank you, Zoe. I'm sorry. Sometimes your brain cross wires, doesn't it? I'm going to use that as an excuse anyway. Cormorants tend to be brown and black, whereas shags can be greeny black, and they are slightly smaller and slightly more S-shaped, whereas these are more 5-shaped. Cormorants have bald patches at the base of their chin. But the key, really obvious difference for me is cormorants tend to have flat heads, whereas shags have 4 heads. This will go, and so the difference outside of the breeding season means that they're very easily confused because the crest goes and so does the white thigh patch. So bald bits around the beak and a flat head is a cormorant. And this is a shag with a forehead. The other thing that's different is that a shag will jump clear of the water and dive, whereas a cormorant will go straight down and won't jump clear of the water. Apologies for the photos, but I'm always miles away. And the other interesting thing about shags, so we've got an adult shag on the right with 2 juveniles from this season who have yet to fledge. They often put lost fishing gear in their nests, which is bizarre, but then so do cormorants sometimes, just not to the same extent. So here we've got a youngster. This is actually a hard to tell, is it a shag or is it a cormorant? These are shags with the forehead, and you can see that the heads are bobbing, they're vocalizing to each other. They're different ages, there's some bigger ones and there's some smaller ones, but they're agitated. And the reason they're agitated is someone is too close taking some footage. So always be aware of signs of agitation, little bits of noise, or constantly moving their head around and looking agitated. Obviously, everyone loves a puffin. I saw a dead puffin yesterday, reported to the Marine Strandings Network in Boscastle Harbour. Devastatingly sad. We've had huge wrecks of puffins this year, all the way down the kind of UK coast into France and Spain, which is devastating. Did you know that the beak that fades during the winter fades because it molts off the coloration? So the beaks in the winter are smaller and paler, and then they grow their larger beak during the summer. They can be on their nest for 13 in the burrows for 13 weeks, and they have 1 egg again, so very vulnerable. In the chat, I'd like you to put, please, so I hope your typing skills are up to it. How many sand eels do you think that is the record for being held in 1 puffin's beak? How many sand eels is the record for being held in 1 puffin's beak? Some people are quick off the mark. Okay, 25, 38, 150, 50, 45. Utterly gobsmacking. It wasn't quite 150, but it's 83. How on earth do you get 83 sand eels in 1 beak? But I don't know if you can see there's this yellow gapey bit. This is really elasticated. So it means that the mouth can kind of open out into a square shape rather than a triangular shape. It's really quite fascinating. They breed at 5 years. As I said, they'll be on the nest for 13 weeks. And they're red listed, very charismatic. Everybody loves them, and they nest in the burrows. So can you see underneath this puffin burrow hole that's here, there is one of the black birds. Is it a shag or is it a cormorant? Well, with that amount of fishing gear in the nest, it's actually most likely to be a shag, and it's definitely a shag. This is the puffin wreck that we've had around Cornwall this year. It's been absolutely devastating and really worrying, likely because they're visual feeders. The sea has been rough, it's been full of runoff from the land, so it's been full of sediment, and the puffins can't see to feed. That's the theory currently anyway. And that's I could actually put the photo in that I took yesterday, but this is a photo of a dead puffin. Very, very sad to see. Okay, so razorbills, one of the smartest birds, I reckon, amber listed as well. They have 1 egg, but they only stay on the nest for 7 to 8 weeks in total. So they're on the nest much less time. A bit like the kittiwake, monochrome until it opens its mouth, and it's got this fantastic yellow mouth. And they fledge by leaping off the cliff. And then when they're on the water with the fledgling, it's usually the male that's with the fledgling. They tend to live to 13 years. If you get a photo like this, it's because the bird has likely been feeding. It's struggling to take off because it's got a tummy full of fish, and the chances are you've disturbed it because it's flying away from you. Not guaranteed, but there's a chance. So you don't really ever want to get a photo like that. And then, as I said, you'll often have the parent at the front with the little chick at the back. You never want to separate them because the chick's very vulnerable to predation, but this is usually the dad as opposed to the mum. This is one of my favourite birds as well, amber listed. This is the guillemot. Absolutely love them. Not to be confused with the cormorant, obviously, although I managed to do that tonight. I've no idea how. They have 1 egg again, and they'll be on the nest for 8 weeks, much like the razorbill, and they'll stay at sea for 2 years before they actually start breeding. Their lifespan is 23 years. In the chat then, quickly, What is the record for a guillemot dive in terms of meters depth? How deep can a guillemot dive? Okay, 10 meters. Yeah, lots of options. I think you're all going to be a tiny bit surprised then, because the dive, I once met a guillemot expert on the island of Lundy, and I said, look, I've read the guillemots can dive to 180 meters. Is it correct? And they went, no. And I thought, oh, classic, isn't it? They said 200 meters. One has been filmed 200 meters with an oil at the base of an oil rig on a camera. Utterly crazy. I have no idea how they managed to do it. How does their body not crush? How do they manage to get back to the surface? Honestly, they're just amazing birds. This is a bridled guillemot with a little white line here. They're slightly more unusual than the non-bridled ones, and this one's obviously having a bit of a food fest. They go on these ledges, utterly, utterly beautiful. They're like steep cliffs, and they're just like little flats with little balconies and nothing else. They've got no flat, they've just got the balcony, and they're ridiculously close together. They only have one egg. Now, at the moment, you can see that most of the birds, apart from a diagonal line going from top left to bottom right, most of the birds are black because they usually face inwards and keep their egg on their feet. When they're worried, there will be birds will start to turn and you'll get loads of white on the cliff. So if you've got lots of black, that's a really good sign. If these birds with one egg on their feet on the ledges have a sudden disturbance that really freaks a couple of the birds out, the whole lot will fly. And as they fly, they will turn round, not have time to drop their eggs on the ledge, and they will fly off with the eggs, and the eggs will smash on the ledge below. And that is the total end of their nesting season for a whole year. So put a year's worth of effort into creating that egg, and it's been lost in a single disturbance incident. They are beautiful, as you can see. There's a little chick down here. It's a very cute little chick down here. And the adults are all crowded together. So it's really, they're well protected, these chicks, because there's always lots of adults around. But things do go wrong. And when I said that the eggs will smash on the ledges below, one of our volunteers took this in the Farne Islands, boat way too close, and unfortunately guillemot flew off the ledge and took the egg with it, and here's the albumin from the egg, and you can see there are other smashed eggs down there as well, so that's something you want to avoid. Beautiful eggs, that shape where they're wide at one end and narrow at the other. Allegedly, some people say to stop the egg from falling off the ledge, it rotates round in a circle. But modern research seems to suggest it actually makes it easier for the bird to turn the egg over so it doesn't get cold on the underside, so that they can keep it warm by turning it over underneath their body. This has got a little hole in it, so that this little chick can come out with its little bird nesting egg breaking bit on its beak. Very vulnerable to predation, as you can imagine.
So 15 minutes, Sue.
Thank you very much, Claire. Great. Signs of disturbance, lots of head bobbing, looking around, maybe some vocalizing. Even the little chick is looking like, doing a bit of head bobbing here. So these are nervous birds. These chicks, if they're left on their own, are extraordinarily vulnerable to predation. What you don't want to do is leave chicks on a ledge because the adults have flown off. They'll go in rafts on the water. This is a raft of auks. So we've got guillemots, mostly razorbills, to be fair, with their fat beaks. In fact, can't, pardon?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. Cheers. I can't see any thin beaks for gillies, so they're mostly. But what you don't want to do is separate them and drive through a raft of any species of bird. Okay, this is a Manx shearwater. I love Manx shearwaters because they will coast down to the surface, then they will flip from side to side, and the force of the air being squashed on the water will actually rise them upwards. So they'll do white, black, alternatively, and go down and up and down and up. And they don't need to use their wings to do that. Utterly amazing. I just love them to bits, and they're just beautiful things to look at. This one is them taking off. Again, not something that you want to see in the vicinity of you at all. And then a whole load of birds taking off, which again is also not an ideal situation. That black, white up, down is called dynamic soaring. They stay on the nest for 19 weeks, and they migrate 6,000 to 10,000 miles from their nesting sites to South America. They've also got little or no tail, which I always find quite fascinating. Okay, here we've got, always love this, any gull with yellow legs. I always love yellow leg gulls because they're lesser black gulls. This is a skua and it's a kleptomaniac. A kleptomaniac means that it will attack another bird so that the bird regurgitates its food and so that the skua can then eat it. It encourages the bird to disgorge, and then it can eat the food that the bird has caught. What I really liked about this particular case is that this is a sandwich tern, and this sandwich tern was chased by the girl, probably a herring gull, but couldn't quite tell from the photo. But it refused to give up its food and just flew off and ignored the herring gull completely, which I thought was great. We've had a return of white-tailed sea eagles, obviously in Scotland. You've had them for a long time, you lucky things. But we have started getting them elsewhere in the UK, which is great. Always described as a barn door, and they can stall in midair when they're disturbed. Reintroduced species, but utterly spectacular and top predators. Some of the wading birds that we've got oyster catchers. How many chicks can you see in this photo? Well, there's actually one, two, there's a one at the bottom, there's 3 little chicks. They leave the nest almost immediately on hatching, and they'll basically be on the nest for 4 weeks. They can live up to 41 years old, and I think they're one of the UK's underrated birds. They will do this. Apparently, they do serious damage to each other if they use their beaks to attack each other. So what they do is they use their voices, and they will march parallel to each other along the shore, piping away, squawking away at each other, and that's their sign of aggression and territorial marking, basically. Okay, these are obviously eggs in a nest. Quite obvious, but if you're an oyster catcher, you don't make a nest at all, so their eggs are almost impossible to spot. Another key thing to think about if you're doing activity sports around the coast is to not disturb birds like this. So basically, on short winter days, the birds need to replenish all their energy, and they have to do that at low tide. So if anything keeps disturbing them at low tide, they're going to really struggle to get enough food to be able to survive the next night. Shoreline is obviously really rich in food sources. What we don't want to do is coincide peak activity with when they're supposed to be feeding, and that peak activity to disturb them, because that displacement could mean a lack of survival for them. So we wouldn't like it if every time we sat down to have our Sunday lunch, Sunday roast, somebody came in and stopped us eating it. Wouldn't be great. And then obviously you've got all these other spectacular birds around the coast, particularly vulnerable species, but especially the youngsters when they're learning to feed themselves, like this beautiful kestrel. Okay, so impacts of disturbance. Disturbance from human activity and from dogs leads to stress, less feeding, as I've already mentioned, and using more energy. So if we look at the energetic costs, that can result in starvation and mortality. It reduces the breeding success that they have because they're leaving their nest, the eggs are getting cold and predators are eating chicks. They have reduced feeding and resting time, which leaves them unable to successfully migrate. If you're going from the Arctic down to the Antarctic, you need to have really good fat supplies on your body to be able to do that. And there will be behaviours which you'll spot, like the bobbing and voicing, but it's the physiological changes that we can't see, all those invisible things like raised heart rates, increased vigilance, potential abandonment of otherwise suitable habitat that we're probably not even aware of. So I found this paper in 2025, and I thought it was really good, summarising the impacts of disturbance, most of which we don't even think about. The thick blue lines are the numbers of papers that are proving these effects. So we've got lots of papers that show the stimuli and the behavioural consequence, but there are relatively few papers that show the metabolic and physiological costs of disturbance from activity, but also artificial light, noise, tourist seasons, for example, and predators and humans. It affects their genetics, their psychology, their neurology, and their physiology, as well as that behavior change that we can see. We can count breeding success if we're doing lots of monitoring, their size, their shape, and the number of parasites that they have. So those are all potential consequences of disturbance. So looking at the energetic costs, well, They'll use more energy. Why? Because they can use 12 times the standard metabolic rate, which is 12 times the amount of energy flying as a result of disturbance than they would if they'd stayed where they were. Constant flushing wastes precious energy that they need to survive that night or that winter. They have a stress response with a faster heart rate. I didn't know this. They have a raised body temperature as well, which of course is going to use more energy even without them moving. Sleep disruption. Well, we all know that sleep disruption and sleep deprivation is actually a torture technique, but they can be disturbed from sleep by artificial light at night, human activity close by, and the sleep deprivation leads to they're not so motivated to go and forage and to reproduce. Looking at feeding and foraging, well, if they lose feeding time because they're constantly alert and relocating, that's going to have a substantial impact on their fat reserves. They'll abandon food-rich areas for poorer quality habitat. They'll have increased competition at the habitat they've had to shift to, and they can starve. And the cumulative effects, when you have a minor disturbance, when it's combined with other severe impacts, you tend to find that only the most tolerant species or the most tolerant birds will stay put. Looking at breeding and reproduction, if they're at the nests, the parents will flee. They'll expose their eggs, which will go cold, probably never hatch. The chick will miss feeds and likely starve, and eggs and chicks are exposed to those predators. They have reduced productivity, so they may have one egg or no eggs, or they should have 4 eggs and they only have 2 eggs. They'll spend less time incubating, they'll spend less time feeding the chicks, they'll have increased incubation time, so it takes longer for that egg to hatch than it should. They'll have reduced hatching rates because a lot of the eggs will fail, and more chick mortality. And this is quite an interesting concept. Flight initiation distance. How far away are you from a bird before it will fly away in response? And the answer is it depends on the species because it's variable. And it depends which shorebird that they tested, depends on what distance you had to be away to avoid disturbing them. So basically, wildlife managers need to be conservative in developing the buffer zones around them. So that's why the WiSe code says 100 meters. Okay, out of the 26 seabird species we've got, these are the key threats that they are to them. Lack of food from industrial fishing, bycatch that's accidental, climate change increasing storminess, non-native species moving in, particularly rats affecting their nesting, new pathogens like avian flu, disturbance. That's the one we can relatively easily do something about, which is why we all need to stay that 100 meters away, and then pollution from chemicals and plastics, and a new threat that's emerging potentially, but is being managed hopefully more efficiently, is offshore wind. It needs to avoid high density areas for seabirds. What seabirds need from us, we can provide them with safe places on land and sea by having marine protected areas and special protection areas and banning damaging fisheries. We can make sure that there's plenty of food by fisheries management and allowing the species to recover. And we can mitigate the impacts from fisheries, offshore wind and recreational activity. Recreational activity, probably the easiest one to manage. Better fisheries management will allow the species to recover and reduce bycatch. Spatial planning for offshore wind means that we can have coexistence, and there is this compensation mechanism, which, although very controversial, is essential, and effective management of people around sensitive nesting sites. So if you're guiding for birds, learn some of these exciting facts, blow them away with how deep a guillemot can dive. Set the scene before you depart and say, look, we're not going to go close. You're going to need your binoculars. We'll provide you with binoculars, or we'll give you a monocular. You can get really good, cheap kit to look. Encourage participants to alert you when they see seabirds so that you don't accidentally miss one or disturb something. Work on your natural history skills, always create a good example. Don't avoid the bad news. If you saw a dead puffin yesterday, talk to people about it and talk about the reasons why puffins are struggling. This year in particular, always put the well-being of the wildlife first and discourage the naming of sensitive seabird sites online, because all that will do is add to the problem. Just seen white-tailed sea eagle in Cornwall. Let's put it on social media and cause issues for that bird by everybody going to see it. We need binoculars, we need kit so that we can actually stay a really good distance away from the coast and still have a spectacular experience. So what's key? Slow, quiet approach with minimal noise. Be aware of the effects of engine fumes, particularly close to the coast or around caves, nesting ledges. Sensitive to the signs of nervousness. You don't want to encourage birds to fly at all. If they're on the water, you want to leave them. If they're on nests, you need to leave them. Go slowly around rafts of birds, give them a wide berth. Beware of small groups later in the season who are particularly vulnerable. Avoid giving predators an easy meal and be alert, observant, quiet, and careful. So here's a summary of the best practice. This puffin's admiring its toenail stuff, which is, yeah, there you go. We've got a wildlife operator coming up, slowing down at 300 meters. What you generally don't want to do is stop. Now we had to do that in the graphic, but you don't want to stop really. You want to keep moving at a no wake speed. A predator was top to look. If you've got a constant engine sound, then the birds will be less likely to be worried and concerned because they don't think you're a predator. No closer than 100 meters. Use those good lenses on cameras or binoculars. Be careful, particularly around nesting time, obviously, which can be very long. Remember, 20 weeks. Move away just as slowly and quietly and avoid sailing through those rafts of birds. This is an example of a shag, young juvenile shag that got caught up in a net that had been lost on the shore. It was awful to watch. It was held underwater for a couple of minutes until the next big wave came with the surf and basically buoyed it into the air. And it was up in the air for a while and then it was drowning again under the water. All I can say is thank goodness on our boat survey we managed to rescue it. We've got birds reference cards that you can have, but you can laminate them, you can use them and give to people while you're sailing out somewhere. If you don't have a guide, they can educate themselves as they go. And yeah, that's it really. The wise way to watch wildlife and best practice is what we all need to try and do. I will stop sharing my screen and hopefully you'll put loads of questions in the chat that I can answer shortly. And we've got a quiz for you. There are 5 questions in this, and I'm going to give you time to read and look.
I didn't do you much time.
First time ever.
Much better than I.
First time ever. And I put 5 extra slides in.
It was cool seeing the latest research, Sue.
That 2025 paper's
fab. Yeah, I'm keen to share that with our RSPB colleagues.
Cool. Three of you finished, well done. Speedy people. I'm assuming one of them's Janet because he's faffing with his pen, so he must have finished. Well done. Yes, Zoe will put the link to the cards in for you. Do it shortly when we finish the quiz. 10 of you've done. Just wait for one more. Okay. Yep, we're there. All right then. So the first question, which seabird is the ultimate migrant? It's actually the Arctic tern. It goes from the Arctic to the Antarctic. Well done. Why should parents be left on the nest? To save energy? Yes. Keep eggs warm? Yes. Avoid egg or chick predation? Yes. Stop eggs being knocked off ledges? Yes. So those are all correct. But the best answer is actually all of the above. Which seabird has, oh, see, I'm really sorry. I didn't really mention the shock absorption, but I kind of did mention the really strong skull. Which seabird has, and then you knew the answer anyway, it's the gannet. Well done. Intelligent creatures, you. What should you do if you think you've spotted a rare bird? Take a photo, always useful. Put its location on social media, definitely not. Contact the local national bird organisation and stay 100 metres away. Excellent answers, well done. I would say all of those 3 answers that you've come up with are the right things to do. If you don't take a photo, you can never, it's harder to prove to people that that is actually what you saw. How much do you feel you've learnt about seabirds? Okay, that's good. And for the first time ever, I think I didn't already know all of it. Yay, that's the first for all of us. Okay, the one thing I forgot to tell you is the traffic lights for the 26 seabird species. There are 2 that are green and doing okay. So green listed and doing okay. 2 out of 26 species in the UK. There are 14 that are amber listed, so at risk, and there are 10 that are red listed. So we've now got 24 birds amber and red listed and only 2 species that are doing okay, which is more than a bit worrying, isn't it? Okay, well done. I think that's it. We're finished with that then. So, and I can't see what's next, Zoe. Oh, yes, I can. So the next thing is the quiz, and we've got shoreline with Claire. So straight over to Claire. Thank you very much.
So we're going, guys, from the large to the small, to the things that you see every day. But hopefully I'll give you a bit more information if you don't already know. But I'm very keen, when I start talking about shoreline and invasive species, to get a load of chat going on the right-hand side about all the cool things that you guys already know. So I've noticed on this call we have some fellow sea kayakers. Hopefully there might be a coasterer or 2 in there as well, and suppers. So this is the stuff most of us will come across most of the time. And we've got to be careful about this as well. So thanks, Zoe. So we're looking at the intertidal, the shoreline, the bits that we walk across, ideally with some good footwear so that we don't damage it or it doesn't damage us. Hopefully you're familiar with the...
Zoe, we've got the slide and the slides at the side. You had it full screen just before.
Thanks, Zoe.
That's all right. There we go. Try again. IT, there's always some. So you had it full screen and then it went to the slides and the... There we go. That's full screen.
Yeah. So we are getting loads and loads more of our publics are going into the shoreline, exploring things. Hopefully you are involved with your local schools and colleges who may be looking at this kind of stuff as well. But our shoreline is changing. Climate change is rampant, and this is usually one of the first places that we see that change. And these guys actually live in a really extreme environment. They have to deal with everything. Can we shift on, Zoe? They have to deal with all of the environmental challenges from wind, sunlight, waves, tides, salinity, all the way through to, next slide, Zoe, all of the stuff that we do, the biology, what predates on them, what pollution goes in. Because if you're in a rock pool, if you're a little beastie in a rock pool, then you're not likely to be able to escape, especially at low tide. So when we talk about extremophiles, that's the posh word for anything that lives in an extreme environment. So most of you probably think about, bugs that live in volcanoes or deep sea vents. Actually, our rocky shore has some of the most extreme adaptations of any of our species. So I'm going to tell you about some of them. Only a handful, there are loads more, but hopefully these are the common ones that you will see. So this is a beadlet anemone. First thing to notice is around its edges, it's got these little blue cells. These are called acrohegi, and they are really cool. We don't often see the colour blue in nature, but you see it if you look closer. You have to sit and stare at some of these beadlets and you'll see it. And they are stinging cells. As well as on the end of their tentacles, they have nematocysts. So nematocysts are kind of spirals that are pressurized and they fire them. Now, dare I say, even though we ask you not to touch stuff, most of you will have put your finger in a sea anemone at some point.